All right, meeting's in order. And Amy, while you're up, would you lead us in a pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. First item of business is a opportunity for members of the public to make presentations on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that wishes to address us on a matter not otherwise agendized? Seeing no request to speak, we'll go to consent agenda items 2 through 5. I do have two requests to speak on that.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
we should report out from a closed session.
Oh, do you want to report out in closed session?
Yes, sir.
Well, why don't you do that? That's a good idea.
This evening in closed session, we discussed the approval to initiate or intervene in a legal action, and no action was taken by the commission.
Okay, great report. We're now going to the consent agenda, items 2 through 5. I have two requests to speak by a couple of gentlemen I would recognize, but I don't see them in the building. Are they outside? So they wish to speak on item 4, and I would pull that off for the purpose of letting them comment on that. Question on 3. So we have items 2 and 5. Have a motion to approve those two. Hearing once, twice, anybody? Moved and seconded. Okay, Oscar and Chris. Item 3, question on item 3. Commissioner Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read the report and I just struggled a little bit to try to understand. So what exactly are we getting for the 50,000? I wasn't able to distill more out of the matrix that was on the.
Sure. Commissioner Villegas, the proposed scope of work for HNTB is a continuation of their services. For the channel deepening project, we have hired 3 consulting firms to assist the port as the local sponsor of the project. HNTB Corp. Inc., ICF Jones and Stokes, and a third firm in Washington, D.C., Steinberg and Associates, excuse me, for assisting the port as the local sponsor. The role of HNTB is to provide coordination services with the Army Corps of Engineers. The principal staff person for that firm is Tom Chapman, the former commander of the Sacramento district of the Corps, and he provides assistance to staff in terms of analyzing the Corps' internal processes and making recommendations both to the Corps and to the staff on directions to move forward with the project. In terms of what they did perform last year, one of the things that we struggled greatly with is to position ourselves as a true project sponsor for the project, and as opposed to, frankly, an entity that just funds the work of the Corps. And so we worked very hard with the assistance of Tom Chapman to set up a regular set of meetings each week with the Corps, and also a executive meeting with the commander of the district and his upper level staff to make sure the project was on track and on target. What this next phase that we're asking for an extension, as we've expended funds under the prior contract, would be to further that effort. Mr. Chapman is also assisting us with creating a coordination meeting with the resource agencies. We're now having meetings with them to provide consolidated coordination between the National Marine Fisheries Service, the U.S. Department of Fish and Game, and California Department of Fish and Game to give us a consolidated response on their reaction to the channel deepening project, and that will help us eventually get to the record of decision. So, in a nutshell, that's a little bit all over the place, but that's essentially the services that they provide. As far as how they're differentiated from ICF Jones and Stokes, ICF Jones and Stokes provides services more on the environmental aspects of the project and the biological opinion and the biological assessment and the supplemental EIR and EIS. So they're more of dealing with the actual biology and environmental impacts, whereas HNTB assists us as we've cut back in staff. They assist us in providing coordination services with the Corps due to their experience in working with the Corps.
So, I guess as a matter of process, it would, I'm not sure how to phrase it. It would be helpful, I guess, to know when we need to pay $50,000 for somebody to do what you've described. And you described essentially what I thought it was, which is, it's hard to get your arms around it. And I'm sure it's important, and I know it's important, but it would be helpful to know that as we're getting closer to the point where we have to pull the trigger on a $50,000, because I don't know where the money's coming from, and I'm assuming we have it, and we've budgeted for it, and it's available. But it would be helpful to know that we're approaching a point where we're going to have to spend $50,000 for somebody to advise us on or help coordinate our services. And I feel like there's no other options. I mean, we're at this point, whether it was 50, 150, or 250, there's no way to say, well, we don't really need this service, or what are some other options, or where I feel like we're sort of, it's on consent. I mean, so it would be helpful, I guess, to know kind of how we got to where we are. Maybe a little more background as to why we're sort of pulling the trigger on $50,000. And I guess that is my next question: is where is the money coming from, and do we have it?
The money is coming from a account that was created, a CIP account for the channel deepening project, and that's how our services are paid for out of that account. The source of that revenue is two $500,000 loans from the city of West Sacramento, specifically for the channel deepening project. So those funds were loaned to that and were for the specific purpose of that project. As you know, we have an item later in the agenda to transfer part of that money to another more pressing project, but that was the purpose of those original funds for the channel deepening project.
Just generally, though, that I mean, it wasn't specific for anything like this, but it was just generally for the deepening.
When the city did the original loan, the actual language was for capital projects, but to date we've used those for channel deepening specifically. But the loan came with it the caveat that they used to be used for capital projects, and as opposed to going into the operating account for the port.
Yeah, so I have a different question, which is why are we still doing this? All you can project in the staff report is that we wouldn't start construction any earlier than 2014, but we don't have a path. We don't really have a path to get the project done. I mean, if that, given this time frame, we're highly likely not to make our Prop 1B time frame, so we will lose millions of dollars that's allocated to this project. Then we have to rebuild that with a harbor fee over time. That's not going to happen in 2 years. The federal government's pot of money available for projects like this is hugely oversubscribed now. For a lot of reasons, but one being the big focus on the East Coast and Gulf Coast ports as a result of the Panama Canal widening. And although our numbers are good on cost benefit, they're not amazing compared to other ports. And so it's hard for me to see, other than spinning our wheels so that which we can't afford to do, where the end game is here. And if we spend money doing stuff right now on the environmental and all of that, well, if we do find money at some point, it's going to be as irrelevant as the environmental that we did in 1985 or the last time we were on this project. To me, I'm just feeling like we're just doing this so that we can say to ourselves that we're still doing channel deepening, but it doesn't seem like there's a real project here that we can build.
One of the things we tried to identify in the staff report is to get us to a point at which the work that has been done to date is preserved for as long a period as possible, and with our own environmental analysis done on other projects, that is typically the certification point for an environmental document. And in this case, the point, that similar point is what's called a record of decision. And so what we try to outline in the staff report is that, as it is looking bleaker in order to start construction at this point, a point at which we can preserve the work that is done to date without it being all for naught is that record of decision, at which point an environmental document is certified. And so these services for hiring HNTB are in an effort to get to that point of that record of decision as a minimum point. And then, if economics change, they change. It's not looking like that, but that's, at least at this point, our objective is to get to that record of decision, or that's our recommendation.
Okay, I mean that makes sense. I mean, I'm comfortable doing that. I don't want to live in a world of self-delusion. I mean, so as we're looking at the port's strategic plan and all of that going forward, the staff report doesn't make it clear, and it doesn't need to, but we should be honest with ourselves that a strategy that depends on deepening within the next couple of years or 5 years or maybe 10 or 15 is not a reasonable strategy. So we better come up with we better have a plan B for how to have a strong, thriving port that does not depend, as we have for the last several years, which is we're cause for good reason. We had encouraging we had the Prop 1B money. That was a big win. We had encouraging signs from the Corps and elsewhere that we would have a project, but and so it's been totally reasonable to say that's coming, and so let's plan for that. But it seems now clear that that's highly unlikely to be a near-term solution, and so we need to be adapting affirmatively and strongly and boldly and immediately towards a strong port that does not depend on a deeper channel in the near term.
Marty, and I think then
I was just going to reiterate what Mike said, and I think it went back to Board Member Villegas' point about seeing things ahead. The business plan really is the strategy for this port, so that's why it's an information item here. But for the channel deepening, as Mike mentioned, we looked at the key milestones, and the next logical one would be the ROD in 2014. So that's why this effort's there. As Mike mentioned, that's a good place to not stop, but hold for a minute, and then really focus on generating additional cargo, and then resuming the effort and the need for channel deepening. So it's a key milestone point. Makes a lot of sense to finish up, button up, as Mike mentioned. Then that work would be a logical stepping point. But as Mayor Cabalden mentioned, I think it really underscores the importance of the business plan. What is the game plan for the port? What is the assessment of cargo? Are we really focused at the right spot? And if we get additional cargo, I think then having that ROD for the deepening project really could position us for funding to actually deepen the channel.
And Commissioner Johannesson has a question.
Yeah, Mike, just on the services itself, just going through the exhibit, it looks like it's mostly meeting coordination. Is there more? Because they've got a engineer at $220 an hour doing meeting coordination.
Well,
is there more to it than meeting coordination?
Yeah. Yes. Well, yes and no.
Or why do we need someone? Why are they assigning someone with that expertise?
One of the reasons we hired HNTB was because of their experience with working with the Corps. As you know, the Corps is a extremely complicated organizations. In my personal experience, one of the most complicated organization I've ever worked with. And having a person, specifically Tom Chapman, that has worked within that bureaucracy, if you will, has been of great benefit. And when we meet with the Corps, when we, he is able to guide us through that process. So in effect, it leads to meetings and setting up meetings with key individuals, but it's more than that. It's getting the right individuals to the meetings, getting the topic that needs to be discussed, navigating, I guess maybe a better word, but it would be navigating through the Corps' very complicated and ever-changing processes, and Tom Chapman has been very valuable in doing that, and you know, we tried to do that for years with our own staff, and I think we've made more progress, you know, with having the assistance of Tom Chapman and his firm in navigating that process than we have in years, and he does that both on the core side, and then of late he's also been helping with that on the resource side, in creating a structure with the resource agencies so that we're not just meeting with lower level staff who send both the Corps and the Port in constant circles of trying to gather the right information, but it's also, you know, having a regular set of meetings with the regional hierarchy of those agencies to make sure that we're getting answers and we're getting the right answers in a timely fashion. So Tom has helped set up Mr. Chapman has helped set up that structure, if you will. So it's navigation, structure, and meetings is kind of what his task has been to date, and will continue to be in this next phase of his contract.
Thanks.
Other questions, comments? Has anybody proposed it's on for approval? Do I have a recommendation or a motion to approve the recommended action? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? Hearing none, it's unanimously passed. Next item we have is number 4 on the consent agenda. I do have 2 requests to speak. Mike, did you want to address this first, or should we just go right to the speakers?
Sure. I can do a quick summary of the report. The item before you this evening is the Washington Overpass project. This item is actually both on the commission calendar to be part of a tri-party agreement between Union Pacific Railroad, the city, and the port, and then it is on the city council agenda because the actual Washington Overpass is a city-owned feature, and so there's agreements between the city and Sierra Northern Railroad on their agenda later this evening. But this item is before you today principally to provide a missing link to our rail system that we've been working very hard on the past couple years to bring it up to a stage to be able to bring in additional rail traffic to the Port of West Sacramento. The port over time has been, and especially the last 10 years, restricted in the ability to bring in cargo by rail, and over the past 24 months we went through a process with Sierra Northern Railroad and Union Pacific Railroad to complete or have in the process to complete $12 to $15 million of rail improvements at the port or leading to the port. Those include replacement of virtually every bit of line from the Union Pacific main line to the port, including items both funded by the port and Sierra and by Union Pacific Railroad. The CMEX rail line, which was a second unit train landing track as well as a track to CMEX. That was a public-private partnership where CMEX funded a portion of that project, and we sought grant funding through SACOG and the state to fund that facility. And then the loop track, which was a grant that we sought through the Federal Rail Administration, and worked another public-private partnership with Sierra Northern Railroad through the sale of property to them, but also to create a loop track funded by FRA at the port. And then this would be the last piece of the puzzle, if you will, which would be to bring a bridge which has been deficient since the early 2000s from 286,000 pounds, or from 268,000 pounds to 286,000 pounds. That's very significant for a number of reasons, principally because larger trains require 6-axle locomotives to bring those trains into the Port of West Sacramento. Those 6-axle locomotives cannot go over that bridge with the current weight classification. So with a very, very modest fix to upgrade the structure of that bridge, we can bring it up to standard to bring in those large bulk cargo trains. Secondly, we've been very limited in terms of our project cargo that we've been able to bring into the port. Prior to the 2000s, this bridge was deemed adequate, if you will, to bring in both unit train service and also heavier cargoes. In 2002, the Union Pacific Railroad, in accordance with the agreement with the city for that bridge, notified the city that there were structural issues with the bridge. At the time, the city chose to obtain grant funding for the structural issues related to the pedestrian and vehicular aspect of the bridge, but chose at the time not to upgrade the structural part of the bridge. And what that resulted in was an immediate downgrading of the bridge because it no longer was able to be certified for that 286,000 pounds, so it was downgraded to 268. So what we have recommended to you tonight is to authorize the chair to execute an agreement with Union Pacific Railroad and the city to construct and maintain that bridge in substantial form as contained in the agreement, and then authorize the transfer of $335,000 from the Deepwater Channel CIP to the Washington Overpass CIP account. Those funds would then be paid back over time. One of the items in the city's strategic plan is the creation of a rail fee for the city. We have implemented that fee at the port through the port's tariff, charging $30 per car for items coming to the port. We will also be pursuing a rail fee for all rail traffic in the city, which will also aid in the repayment of that. So initially, these funds will be transferred from the CIP account, which was created for channel deepening. But over time, they will be repaid back into that account by this rail fee. Staff recommends that our most pressing issue at this point in time is the upgrade to the rail bridge, and then as funds are put back into that account over time, they will be available for channel deepening or other capital projects in the future. Happy to answer any questions that you might have on the project.
Questions at this time? I have two requests to speak on this item. First is Tim Campbell. Or Tim and Derek, you guys decide who you want to go first. Sure.
Oh, well, about now you hear what I say. You guys all were shaking your head like, hear what I was saying. This doesn't make sense. Thank you for wanting
I
me to
can
leave.
hear you from the other room. No
Good, good. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
But my problem is if we could divert monies to go to basically anything we want, which that's what I'm sort of hearing now. We could go and dredge money to rail, which in the history of this port, rail hasn't really played any real significant part of making any money for the port. sounds like we're making it set up to maybe help CMEX more than the Port of Sacramento. If we could divert monies, then let's divert money. I'll back you guys up 110%. I'll back you up, Mike. Let's divert money. Let's get the ship loaders in order. Let's put the money into the infrastructure of the port to make us some money instead of making somebody else money. Because we've been behind the back door of every single thing. Cement. We all do. Hey, you guys were all there. We went to city meetings. We got cement. What happened to the cement market? Fell on its face. We're doing the same thing. We just lost iron fines. Stockton, Port of Stockton made probably millions off this stuff. We just lost iron fines. But we're going to sit there and put money into a rail system that there's no market for anything. We need to protect what we have. And unfortunately, what we have is a port that's fallen apart. And again, like I said, I'm not here saying don't do something, but I fought. My dad fought for dredging. I remember when we had money and all of a sudden our president appropriates $16 million, I think it was, from us. That was heartbreaking to me. I don't know about anybody else up there, but that was literally heartbreaking to me. We finally got something, and they yank it away 6 months later. And now we're going to take what little money we have, and I'll tell you, it scraps. What little money we have for dredging, we're going to give it to the railroad. That has nothing to do with maritime use. Since I've been in that port, I think there's only been two things that came across that port that we needed something for a railroad, and those generators. Am I correct? Two things out of a lifetime of being at the port. And now we're going to appropriate $335,000 to give to the railroad. And quite frankly, I think people are either lying to me or think I'm stupid. But it's not going to go to the Port of Sacramento. It's going to go to maybe CMEX. Heavier trains going to CMEX. And that's no guarantee I'm going to be working at CMEX. They sit there and say they don't need to bring a ship in for 5 years, but they're going to use it as a storage facility. That's what I heard. I don't know if anybody else heard the same things. So if we got money to divert, let's divert it in the infrastructure of the port. And that means let's get our ship loaders up to use to where even if we can't bring in the high tonnage ships because we don't have the draft, at least we could service the people that want to come here. Because right now, I'll tell you right now, we can't service shit. We could service maybe 2 people, rice growers, and that's about it. And I think the old Cargill facility could run. The other 2 belts can't. Let's dump that money into that and let's go advertise ourselves. Let's go get something. Because the direction we're going right now, we're selling land for the railroad and we're pulling money from the dredging project. That's an insult to my local and to me individually. Because I'll tell you right now, I put too much time and too much work into trying to get this port dredged. And nothing against anybody up here. We all know politics are politics and they're going to do what they want. But there's a few of you guys up here that I know have been around for a long time that sort of see the same vision I see. That's a handful of ships coming in and out of that port. But right now, we aren't getting it. And we need to do something that makes maritime use of that port, number one, not rail use. I'm sorry, but I disagree with anything that has to do with putting dredging money into rails.
Thank you, Derek. Tim?
Tim Campbell, Vice President, Local 18. I agree with my president. We've seen a lot of stuff come and go at this port. I'll tell you right now, I've been here a lot longer than any of you have. There's only a few of you that have been here longer than me, including my president. Railroad has never made a dime for this port. Bulk Cargo's made money for this port. Wagner facility made money for this port. You're taking the money from a dredging project from a maritime port to put into a rail facility that has nothing to do with but CMEX. I think we all know that Tykert had a big project go out. I think that's what we're worried about right now is Tykert's project. What about the people what this port was intended for? Was the ILWU, the International Longshoremen and Warehouse Union. They're gone. You know, the only person that's been out here longer than I have is my father. We're getting laid off in a couple weeks because there's no cargo. Politics are bullshit. And I hate to call each and every individual out on this. Politics are bullshit. Cargo is cargo. Let's go to work. We all want to sit around with our fancy clothes on, go to breakfast. I see a lot of you out there. I go to breakfast too, in my work clothes, with Toro boots. What are we doing? We got a big bulk thing going on next week. You know, we're going to send SSA out there. SSA in the city, they got zero relationship. Am I right or wrong on that? Neither one of them can trust each other as far as they can throw them. Everybody owes each other so much money they can't even see straight. We're talking about transferring money from a rail project? Brothers, this is ridiculous. I'm talking about the homeboys that live in this town. That man who's sitting right there in front of me wouldn't talk to me because I didn't live in this town. You know what I did? I moved. So this man could hear my voice. What are we doing? All this fancy talk aside, if it doesn't have to do with money, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. This is crazy. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul for a frickin' rail project that ain't gonna amount to a hill of beans. Everybody that votes on this should be ashamed of themselves. Because all you're doing is worried about furthering your career and betterment. It's sickening. I got to live in this stuff I call skin. And I got to look in the mirror tomorrow morning. And I got to be a man. Got to make sure my dad can eat. Got to make sure my local can eat. You guys ought to be ashamed of what's going on. I think we need a new port guy. I think Lucan should hit the bricks, go pound sand somewhere else.
Tim, can you wrap it up?
Yeah, well, I can wrap it up all right.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Anybody else on this item? It's only two cards I have. Thank you. I'll go back to the commission. Yeah.
Now, Mike, on this, based on what we're doing here, we're transferring money, but we're going to be backfilling that money again. That money is going back into the account based on the rail fee.
Yes.
Okay, so the money is not gone forever. It's going to be transferred and come back. That's the first thing. The second is we're going to be going through the business plan as the next agenda item. Now, I'd like to just have you address how rail, at least preliminarily, how that fits into how we can expand the cargo usage at the port. We'd probably get into that to the next item. But my understanding is this money is not gone. It's going to be backfilled.
That's correct, and it will depend upon the the amount of rail traffic coming through both the city and the port, and is delayed by things such as the economy. But yes, it will be repaid to that CIP account.
And do we have an estimate of what that repayment time frame would be? I know we may not know because of the economy, but has there been any time frame associated with that?
Well, we're hoping that it gets paid back as soon as possible. But one of the things that we've expanded from originally, it was going to only be funded by rail traffic at the port. But as the economy slows in the Pacific Rim, we estimated that is not going to be sufficient to pay that back quick enough. And so one of the things that has been on the council's strategic plan is to look at not only a rail fee just for the port, but a rail fee for the city. And that rail fee would fund things like this, but it would also eventually fund things such as the West Side Rail Relocation Project and other rail projects within the city. And so what we have identified as a source of funding for this bridge, because it's hard to generate enough money for rail when the rail can't cross the bridge. so what we have done is identified a pathway to pursue charging a user fee on all rail users in the city, a nominal fee, a fee that would not, deter business, a fee that's of equal amount in other cities, but to charge that to other users like BP and Agrium and those, and then that would help pay back this account quicker.
Yeah, I think, I think my concern is that we don't come up short. I think we've just had a discussion about the port being on, basically the deepening being on a little bit of a hiatus now. That when we're ready to go with that, when it starts up again, that we have money to be able to fulfill our obligations as soon as it's ready. And it sounds like that's the plan.
Yes, we're also, it's not contained in this report, but we're also going to be bringing forward to you in the next couple of council meetings, commission meetings, a harbor fee. This is a fee that's commonly charged by other ports. We're going to be, the Port of Stockton, for example, charges a fee to users for each ton that goes across the port to pay for the channel deepening as well. And so we'll have actually another source of funding to fund channel deepening as well. So it won't just be this, our objective is to repay this rail account, but, we want to be realistic and it may take some time to generate fees back to this account. So what we're projecting is a two-phased approach, which is that we would generate money from the harbor fee as well. So that would be charged against our existing cargo like rice and other things to pay for channel deepening as well. So we'll have multiple sources for that when we're ready to proceed in the future.
Well, I have a couple of concerns about this. One, the point of having a capital improvement budget is for us to be able to weigh these different priorities. When they come at us just sort of out of the blue, we do have a problem with onshore infrastructure at the port for serving maritime cargo. We don't want to be the most, deferred maintenance port in the West Coast. So I know that's a problem. The whole commission knows that's an issue. That if we want to be competitive with Stockton, if we want to attract more cargo, that we have to make investments in upgrading that infrastructure on a constant basis. Doing it this way, though, I can't weigh that against this proposal. It just comes out of, there's a lot, that's the point of a CIP is to be able to look at all the projects, rank them, assess them one against another, so we can say what's our priority. And this, by coming just all by itself, makes it difficult to do that.
Well, the commission actually approved the CIP project in the last CIP, so what we're doing is proposing tonight to transfer between
yes,
the two.
but when we do the capital budget, then we make those allocations. The CIP is not, the CIP, so we've approved it to be on the menu, but we have not, by having it just come all by itself, we can't, so it's there, it's an authorized project. But to be able to say, of all of the authorized projects that are on the CIP that we're not actually doing because we don't have the funding, is this the one I would put the money in, or is there another project that's also approved on the CIP that would be a higher priority? And so for me, it's not that we shouldn't be taking advantage of opportunities and needs as they occur, but it would be better to be able to understand them in the context of what are the other unfunded CIP items that could have been, if we were making a determination, which I agree with, even though it breaks my heart in the same way that we've heard, there's no point in spending even small amounts of money on a deepening project that isn't going to result in a deepening project. That's not in anybody's. That make us feel better, but it's not getting the channel deeper. But to me, being able to assess within our capital need, our pre-identified capital needs, and be able to say which one is the priority. Is it this one? Okay, then we can make that judgment. The second is the finance piece of it, because we don't have a signed agreement from the railroads that they're going to agree to all the users. That they're all going to agree to a rail fee. And if this were contingent on the final adoption of a rail mitigation fee, I would be much more comfortable with it. Having it simply based on an assumption that a rail fee, every time we've ever talked about a rail fee before, it's raised some hackles, and I know we have a different relationship now, but we just have a different relationship. We don't have a contract, we don't have an approved implementable fee. So that part is of concern to me, because in agenda report for the city, it says that the contribution is going to be repaid by the rail fee or by the port, and we don't have any money to be repaying that out of the port. And using the cargo fee, the harbor fee, that definitely raises a red flag, at least a yellow flag for me. That the money that we're charging our maritime customers for maritime services really should be focused on improving maritime infrastructure that's directly related to them. And if it was the maritime users coming forward and saying, we need this rail bridge, of all the things that are stopping us from using the port more and bringing more ships in, the number one thing on our list, or the number 3 thing on our list, is this bridge. I'd be all for it, but I haven't heard that. I haven't heard the opposite. No one has said it's not important. But the use of the harbor fee, I think in particular, really needs to be focused on the maritime piece, because as was kind of hinted at during the public, well, not hinted, thrown in our face, but I agree. I'm not interested in becoming the world's best rail port. The rail is in service to local companies and to the long-term success of the port, it's not an end in of itself. So,
maybe I misspoke. The harbor fee is not being proposed to be used for rail. I just said that we can use the harbor fee. The harbor fee will only pay for maritime items, and so what I'm saying is, if we needed something related to the channel deeping, we've now created a second source of funds to pay for channel deeping.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I thought you had said if the rail fee wasn't sufficient, we could also use the harbor fee to repay this.
No, I'm sorry
Okay.
if I misspoke.
If I can just follow up. So, Mike, how time sensitive is this project? And before you answer, I guess the part of the concern that I have is, I guess I would want, as Commissioner Camalden indicated, a better sense of kind of how, well, it started with Commissioner Johannesson, how we would repay it. Well, what does that look like? Because this was set aside as a capital budget for a series of things, and I'd like to see also how it compares to the other projects as also mentioned. But it would be helpful to have a little more discussion or information about how this project translates into more maritime use. I mean, ultimately, whatever we do, it has to translate back into how it's going to create the work and the maritime value that we all know it needs to. And so it would be helpful to have that nexus provided as part of the conversation. So, I mean, how time sensitive is this project?
Well, it's less time sensitive because, as was indicated by Mr. Campbell, some of our unit train uses, because of the price of iron ore, are delayed and maybe be delayed for some period of time. So it's less time sensitive in that regard, but it is a missing link, if you will, to bringing in and marketing the port for cargo. So we can wait to a point in the future for that, but it just limits our ability to market the port for rail-based cargo. One of the things I indicated in the staff report was, in terms of project cargo, some of the larger project cargo users, GE, for example, is very interested in when we're going to be upgrading the bridge. GE was the company that brought in the large generators before, and they're limited to do that because this cargo is very heavy, and so we could wait until we get that cargo before we fix the bridge. But on the other hand, then we may be bypassed, for the Port of Stockton if they can't wait the period of time to get the bridge fixed. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg in terms of marketability, but if the commission chose to put it off, it doesn't have a great impact on port cargo.
If I may, I think to some degree, in the interest of time, you've just said the magic words for me, that this isn't extremely time sensitive. I actually have a number of questions about it the more I look at it. And it warrants, I think, a better, and not just, it was on consent, so quite frankly, that's sort of it gets one look from us. This is obviously a little bit more complex than I had originally anticipated. There's some questions I have about anticipated cargo. There's also some questions I have about the temporariness of the fix and what that means. I also, we're moving closer, hopefully, to this business plan, strategic plan, and I think the mayor actually has articulated as well as any when he talks about putting this in the context of prioritization and even the speakers, other than trying to get our ire up and offend us, but whatever. They do make the point that we do, the point of our strategic planning and our business plan is to tease out, what are we really going to be, where we're going to put our energies. We may land exactly where you make this recommendation. So I'm not suggesting today that this is something I would not do, but I'd like to A, get more information, B, put it in overall context of what our plan is, what are we all about, where should our energies and our resources flow first. So I think this, as I would say, this isn't soup yet. We still need to throw in some potatoes and some carrots before we can serve it up. So I would suggest that we defer action on this until a future time we've had a chance to ask and answer those questions, and then do some of this business planning stuff.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I would agree with that. There are a number of questions raised, and some of my questions, which came into it, was just about that, was just the context of how this will benefit us, especially since we're talking about the strategic plan, our business plan next. And so, if we could, I would support that. And one of my questions was, what was we know this has been an agreement that we've had in place for some time. It's something that is causing a problem, but I'm just trying to understand the imperative around it that's affecting our ability to be the port we want to be. And I think that's where the business plan comes in. We really haven't determined that yet. So, I'm not opposed to using the dollars to it as long as the funding is in place to replace it. And especially in context with the conversation earlier around our channel deepening prospects in the short term. But I think we just need to put a little more thought around this. This should be just a regular agenda item in the future, possibly at times certain, so that gives it the consideration it needs.
I would support a motion to continue it.
Now I consider that a motion. Then.
Second, Mr. Housen. All right. Any questions? Mike, you get that? All right.
Thank
All
you.
in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? And that will be continued for further discussion. That takes us to our item 6, the status report on preparation of the business plan. And Mike again, or Marty, whoever's got the helm on this one.
Yes, sir, that would be me. What we are providing you tonight is an update of our business plan and where we're at this point in time. Back in June, the commission recommended that we move forward to update the 2005 business plan that was prepared by Parsons Brinkerhoff. That business plan was done at a time when we were going through the transition with the port and the governance change of the port. It's been a very useful document to us to date as a bulk cargo port, but the commission felt it was appropriate to update, and staff and the commission felt it was appropriate to update that plan to reflect our current financial position as well as changes in cargo over time. At that meeting on June 6th, the commission, or the port CEO, requested that the commission provide 2 members to assist staff as a sounding board for the preparation of that business plan update. The commission chose the chair and vice chair to act in that informal arrangement. What we have done to date is completed an outline of that business plan. That outline has been reviewed by the chair. We're still in the process of setting up another meeting with the vice chair to go over that plan. What you have in your packet this evening is a schedule for completion of that plan that will be brought back to the commission in a workshop format on December, at the December meeting, and then back for final consideration in January. Your attachment 2 of this item is a summary level of that outline, which shows the, if you will, the table of contents of that proposed business plan, including an introduction, the policy framework by which the plan is to be completed, which includes an introduction, background, policy factors such as a cargo analysis, financial analysis, a comprehensive assessment of the liabilities and assets of the port, and an assessment of the market competitiveness of the port. Part 2 of that plan will be a assessment of the operating model that was chosen by the port in 2005. And then lastly, what will be recommended is a 24-month strategic or action plan for implementing the update to the business plan. This is a very, very important document for the port, and our intent is to engage in not only the 2 members that appointed, or excuse me, that have volunteered from the commission, but also to engage our other business partners, which include our current cargo users, labor, and others in the preparation of this business plan. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions?
A quick comment. One is we're also including we're getting close actually to the point of the expiration of some of the agreement. We're not a year away, but the expiration of the agreements that we have in place with Sacramento City and County about the disposition of assets and transfers of proceeds and that sort of thing. That ought to be in here in some way. And then just, secondary, and I've said this before, but I just want to repeat because I have utter confidence in the both the director and the commissioners engaged, but we really need an honest business plan that has a pretty good sensitivity analysis to it, which we didn't really do last time, which was, I mean, so I don't really think of this as an update because virtually a lot of what we had anticipated, envisioned, and planned in that last plan didn't come to reality. And as I was looking over my list of projects that we've contemplated at the port, and more than contemplated at the port, taken to EIR level or approved or done a press conference or a press release about, something like 85% of them never happened. And so as we put this business plan together, it needs to be based on an explicit acknowledgement of that 85%, right? That we don't have a great track record, and it's not on us, but I mean, it's uncertainty in the environment and the economy and all these other factors. But it's not, look, we can't wipe those away. So we need to have a business plan that accounts for that and that also, adjusts in some way for our own brash optimism. And we wouldn't get even the 15% done if we didn't make a play at the other 85. So I'm not suggesting that we're not doing that right. But when we get to this kind of a planning process, we need to say, okay, but what if we don't quite get all those things that we think and hope and assume that we might? Then what? What is that? What is that? What's the plan C for the port at that stage? So.
If I may, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks for the update on this, and I'd agree with Commissioner Kamalden's comments on this. This has to be honest look at the plan, and there's a part of me that immediately reacted to it. The 24-month plan. I think there's some immediacy that we need to understand where we are in the next 6 to 12 months, let alone 24 months. The conversation we just had points to issues we have with the assets we have with deferred maintenance and whatever else we have. Those are immediate things we have to take care of or have a plan for. And the part that I worry about is that we're having this conversation with ourselves, and it sounds like we have a consultant involved. But to the mayor's point, the world has changed in terms of of shipping routes and what's going on in the rest of the world that's affecting this port and other inland ports' ability to move goods in and out. And I think that's the part that I really want us to have that framework as we go into this conversation. I want the people of this community and the port to understand what is our place in this world and going forward, and do we have the assets to make that happen? And if we do have the assets, what do we need to do to activate them and to make them useful towards that end? That's what I expect out of a business plan. And I'm not saying you're not addressing that. It's just the import of that, the importance of that is critical, because if we can't identify that, we can't reconcile that there's a place in there, then we have other issues, and we have to make adjustments and get to that place where we feel comfortable, where we can move forward. I have looked back in the past year and a half that I've served on this body, and we have great energy, we have a lot of ambition, and I want to make this work. But what does that success look like? I'd rather look at ourselves and say, if we can, rather than trying to get the home runs and get the huge projects, which are always we need to do for our own cash flow purposes, but I'll take, if we can aim at 2 or 3 small hits that get us to better execution, that start the ball rolling, that will lead to other successes. That's what I want to see out of this. And I'm assuming in part 2, which is the operating model analysis, will be the financial projections of under whatever scenario we move to. That what will that bring us by way of new harbor fees or rail fees or whatever actions, and because that's the point. Are we generating the revenue we need to sustain itself? So anyway, just those are my thoughts on it. I appreciate the work you're doing. It sounds like we have a process built, but the content is what's important here. So I also want to make sure we grab that.
We will continue to work on this. I think we do have to restructure that meeting with Oscar and myself, hopefully. That's not is that the one that's scheduled for the 16th of November, or are you planning on something with us before then? I don't know.
We don't have that meeting scheduled as yet, but we'll be doing that as soon as possible.
Okay. It is important to do that. And when you look at this timeline just real quickly, and I think I'll be done, but just to kind of be prepared for what Oscar and I meet with you. January 9th, present the business plan. Just so we're all clear, I envision the presentation of the plan not to be the presentation of a final draft that is a vote for that's accepted and off we go. And almost we certainly want some structure and some guidelines and some principles to it, but I fully expect, matter of fact, hope it will be really a document for the conversation as much as anything else, so that the body can come together, the Port Commission can come together to make these ultimate decisions what the plan should be and also how to implement it. And we heard a little bit today from our buddies from labor that there's going to be engagement, no question about that, from the community, not just organized labor, but from the community as well. And I think that's very important, because when we're done, whatever plan we come up with is one that we have to have confidence in, that we can also gain the confidence of our community to support. That's the bottom line here. A successful port in West Sacramento is one that is supported by the community. That's how we define success, and obviously one that pays the bills. But so it'll be more of a working session. So I hope we're not just scheduling that. Whenever we schedule that, it's not just going to be an hour and a half before a city council meeting. I anticipate it, maybe a joint meeting would be fine, but I anticipate it being a rather vigorous working session. That's what I'd like to see come about when we present the business plan to the Port Commission. Okay? Is anything else that needs to come before us? If not, anything else? Any reports?
No, sir.
Well, is there work done here?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, just one quick thing is we're having a ribbon cutting on October 11th at 11 a.m. for the container barge service at the Port of Stockton. Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood will be in attendance at that meeting, and our Mayor Cabalden is tentatively scheduled to speak at that event as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm boycotting that one. I'll be out of town. Thank you very much. And that, if there's nothing else to come before us, we are adjourned.